Hi everyone. Um, just bear with me whilst I get set up. But while I'm doing that, why don't you guys go ahead and tell me where you're all tuning in from, and how your week has gone. Your week, yeah, your week. How your week has gone. What you've been up to. Let's see. Okay. Oh man, I'm really hoping that this week Facebook doesn't have all of its usual bugs. Okay, hold on. That's weird. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, let me know where you're tuning in from, what you've been up to in the last week, and how things have gone since the end of the Movement Control Order, or the CMCO, in most states in Malaysia. Yeah. Did you guys manage to tune in to our Lama Tsongkhapa Day celebrations, which took place on Thursday? In case you didn't know, we had a live streaming event to commemorate the enlightenment and parinirvana of Lama Tsongkhapa, and that was because Kechara Forest Retreat has actually been closed for the last week due to the rise in the number of cases in our state. So we did the whole celebration online, and we commemorated the day with a Lama Chöpa puja, and then it was followed by Tsamrimchi Swift Return puja. And there was an opportunity for people to make offerings, light candles. Good morning, Joyce. Good morning, Jacinta. So yeah, there was an opportunity for people to make offering of candles, to sponsor the pujas, to make offerings of incense, sang. And so that was on Thursday. Today's Sunday, and to this day we are still burning and offering candles for people. So thank you guys so much for, getting involved and participating and jumping in on that stream, on that event. Yeah. So yeah, Lama Tsongkhapa was that's a really good use of your time, Jacinta, listening back to some of the live streams. Yeah, so Lama Tsongkhapa Day, Ganing Ngamcho, was on Thursday, and then last night I went down to Kechara Soup Kitchen for the first time in 2 weeks, because I was in self-quarantine, so I had to miss out on 2 weeks of Soup Kitchen rounds. So I went down last night, and KL, Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital city of Malaysia, was so crowded. It's like everyone had this thing where, because movement was restricted for so many weeks, and then once the restrictions were eased slightly, everybody came out. So yeah, there were crowds in quite a few places, and social distancing wasn't the best. So guys, please remember to continue wearing your masks and to continue social distancing. Keep at least 1 meter away from everyone. But yeah, so that was last night. Kechara Soup Kitchen. So Justin, who is the project director of KSK, was talking about how if anyone has any resources or contacts for people who would like to contribute to KSK's many projects, please get in touch with them. It's things like the empowerment projects, so work and initiatives and activities being done to help empower the underprivileged and less fortunate to generate some kind of income or to learn some kind of new skills during this pandemic time. I guess what the young people these days call a side hustle. But Justin was asking that, if anyone knows of anyone who can contribute to KSK's many different initiatives, please get in touch with them. Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Xiao Li. All right, and I brought down a couple of football jerseys, soccer jerseys, to donate to KSK last night, because the Orang Asli, who are Malaysia's indigenous population, Orang Asli literally translates to native people. So the Orang Asli community in our national park requested for new clothing, so I brought down a couple of jerseys, dark coloured jerseys for them, and yeah, it was really nice to be back out at KSK again, even though it rained for the whole night, from basically 8 p.m. all the way through to 11-12 a.m. It was raining, but it was a good round. Yeah, so that was last night, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we've launched the new shop on the Sam Rinpoche Facebook fan page. So that is up. So thank you guys who have written in with your inquiries. There's a lot of stuff there that's, I mean, it's all basically from Vajra Secrets, right? But it's nice to have another platform to make holy items available for people to invite home. So the Sam Rinpoche shop was launched on Rinpoche's Facebook fan page this past week. And yeah, so next thing that's coming up for us will be Chinese New Year, which is early next year. I can't remember the exact date because I'm terrible like that. I will tell you guys the exact date next week. But Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year is coming up. So if I'm not mistaken, the packages for offerings have already been released. So if you guys want more information about that, you can go to the Kechara Facebook fan page for information. Kechara website, vajrasecrets.com, and so on. Many places, all right? So that's it from me in terms of, I don't know, goings on here. Yeah, but let's get started for today. But before we get started, as usual, do a short prayer to ascribe the information that's going to be shared today. I go for refuge in my Lama, from whom I've received these teachings. I go for refuge in the lineage Lamas, from whom my Lamas received these teachings. All right, so thank you guys very much for joining me today. Good morning, Jillian. Good morning, Penny. Good morning, Sukfan. I hope you guys have all had a lovely week. And yeah, thank you for joining me on this Sunday. So last week, as usual, we'll do a quick recap. Last week, I talked and shared about some ways to deal with difficult people, or rather people whom we perceive to be difficult. So I started out last week by talking about why we use the term perceived, or why we talk about perception, and why we say or we refer to people as, you know, people who we perceive to be difficult. And basically that people, the same person, when they are in a different environment, when they are faced with a different set of circumstances, or when we are dealing with them or interacting with them in a different situation. Thank you very much for being so efficient and posting the link. Yeah, so when we talk about perception and why we perceive people to be difficult, because when we interact with the same person in a different environment or in a different situation or within a different set of circumstances or parameters, that the same person may not necessarily be perceived in the same way. So for example, the example that I gave was our boss, that in the workplace, you know, we may perceive our boss to be very difficult, to be very demanding, to be very sarcastic, to be very petty, to, you know, be very cold and so on. But that same person, our boss, is outside of work, is somebody else's mother, somebody else's father, someone else's husband, wife, partner, daughter, and so on. And that same person may be perceived to be very different according to their relationship with someone else. So the person that we perceive to be difficult may be perceived by someone else to be very warm, to be very nurturing, to be very brave, to be very meticulous, and so on. All right, so they're only difficult in terms of the set of circumstances that we share with them. And once those circumstances change, then that person is perceived to be different, is perceived differently by another group of people. And that if someone is inherently difficult and truly a difficult person, that person would be perceived to be difficult by everyone, universally difficult. But the fact that they're not perceived to be universally difficult, or that they're not treated as being universally difficult, means that that person is not an inherently difficult person. That difficulty and that not fantastic interpersonal relationship or relationship that we have with them is the result of our perception. All right, so I also gave evidence for how, 11th February, there you go, Mark. So I also gave evidence last week of how and why it would be beneficial for us to work on our perception. And I talked about Zimbardo's Stanford Prison experiment And I'm not going to go into the details now. You can watch last week's video for that. But I talked about Zimbardo's Stanford Prison experiment and how if our perception of someone else can change our behavior for the worse, then if we change our perception about someone else, it can also change our behavior for the better. All right? And we can also perceive someone in a different way and treat someone in a different way and have better relationships with other people if we were to tweak or to make adjustments to our perception. All right. So if you perceive somebody, if someone perceives themselves as a guard and perceives somebody else as a prisoner, if that can lead them to change their behavior, so the guard becomes more inhumane, treat somebody else with less dignity, treat someone else with more cruelty, on the basis that I'm a guard and you are a prisoner. How powerful would it be if you were to change your perception of people around you and to think of somebody else, or the person you perceive to be difficult, if you perceive them to be, let's say, your teacher, you perceive them to be as kind as your mother, you perceive them to be another sentient being just like you, who is equally deserving of being happy, equally deserving of not suffering. If you perceive someone else to be like that, then your behavior will adapt and change accordingly. All right. So I talked about how if you want to improve your relationship with other people, if you want to have a better life experience in general, that it would be very helpful and beneficial for you to change your perception of the people whom you perceive to be difficult. And then we talked about why it's our responsibility to change. So when we're talking about changing perception, some people may think, well, why is it I have to change? Why can't they change? And the reason why it's our responsibility to change, why it would behoove us to change, is because maybe the other person isn't in a position to change. Maybe their habits are so deeply ingrained that it's very, very difficult for them to change. Maybe they're not aware that they need to change. Or perhaps they're not in an environment that supports change. So last week I gave the example of people who are leaving rehab for substance abuse, and the advice being that they should not, and they should try as much as possible not to go back to the same environment as they were in before, because it could trigger a relapse. So the same thing Same thing is for us, is that perhaps some people may not be in a position or in an environment that is supportive of their change. They want to change their perception, they're trying to do so, but the environment doesn't support that kind of progress. All right, so if we were to wait for other people to change, it may be a very long time before that happens, and it's much faster for us to work on ourselves. And so if you're waiting for someone else to change and it's taking such a long time, in the meantime, we are suffering. You are the one who's suffering. And what are you suffering from? You're suffering from things like missed opportunity. You're suffering from being anger-led, from being jealousy-led. You're suffering from envy, suffering from disappointment, poor interpersonal relationships, and so on. All right. So I talked also last week about why it's worthwhile for us to work on our perception, because when we work on our perception in general, not necessarily about other people, but when we work on our perception in general, it becomes easier for us to accomplish our goals, because sometimes in order to achieve certain things that we want, we have to interact and deal with people whom we perceive to be difficult. And if you can perceive that person to be not difficult, but perceive that person to be, someone who is has knowledge, has information, has experience, someone who can assist in the accomplishment of your goals. That's what Rinpoche taught us, which is to look beyond the people whom we're dealing with in terms of, oh, this person's so difficult, this person's so demanding, this person is so annoying, this person's so irritating, this person triggers my anger, and so on. But to look beyond that and to focus on the goal. When we are able to work on our perception, it makes it easier for us to accomplish our goals, because it makes it easier for us to look beyond the so-called difficult person and focus on what it is that we want to accomplish. Working on perception is also beneficial because it leads us to stabilizing our moods, because people are no longer in control of our experience. People are no longer in control of our moods, and what people do or what people don't do, how people behave towards us, how people react towards us, no longer affects us negatively unless we allow it to. And finally, it's worthwhile for us to work on our perception because just in general, it helps us to make more friends. How many times have you been in a situation where you've thought, I don't want to talk to that person because I find that person to be very difficult, I find that person to be very boring, I find that person to have nothing relevant to say to me, and so on. So if you want more friends, if you want to be able to reach out to more people, it would be very worthwhile for you to work on your perception in that way. And then finally, last week I also talked about how we can work on our perception. So I spoke about how the easiest, most straightforward way for us to do that is to practice and apply the 8 verses of thought transformation. And why do I keep bringing that up? It's because it was one of Rinpoche's favorite prayers and favorite practices. And although it seems very straightforward and very simple, in actuality, if you think about it, it's very deep. And we need to also think, well, actually, rather, that the 8 verses of thought transformation are a very typical example of our tendency to overlook certain practices because we kind of poo-poo it and think, well, it's very basic, you know, I don't need to do that. I've already gone through it so many times. I've seen it so many times. I know it off by heart. But if you really think about it, how much of the 8 verses of thought transformation have we actually realized and have we actually mastered? So when people talk about, you know, someone who abides in compassion, a person who abides in compassion automatically acts out of compassion. It's not something that they need to consciously think about, but it's something that they just automatically do. As much as we automatically react out of anger, for example, a person who abides in compassion automatically acts out of compassion. And so how much of the 8 verses are we actually abiding within? And how automatic is it for us to behave out of the 8 verses of thought transformation? So, I keep talking about the 8 verses of thought transformation because although it seems very simple, in practice, not all of us are that fantastic at applying it. So when we want to work on our perception, the 8 verses of thought transformation are very, very useful and a very powerful, simple, straightforward practice that even non-Buddhists can apply in order to make adjustments to our perception. And then I also talked about how Rinpoche had advised us to meditate on the other person's good qualities and to meditate on the other person being a sentient being just like us, and also wanting, as much as we do, also wanting to be happy and also wanting to not suffer. All right, so those are some ways, some tools that we can apply when we want to work on our perception. All right, so that is a quick recap for what happened last week and what we talked about last week. Good morning, David. Hey, I was here last week, but you weren't. All right, so so quick recap on what happened last week. For today, what I'm going to talk about is a question that was posed to me on YouTube, and although it's a personal question in the sense of it's a question about my reasons for doing something, why I wanted to answer this in one of these videos is because perhaps there'll be something in the sharing that you guys may find helpful in your daily lives. That is basically it. If not, I wouldn't answer this question. All right. But before I continue, I need to thank the sponsors of today's talk, today's sharing, who are Penny Tan. So thank you very much, Penny. And Penny would like to dedicate her contribution to the following. Through these merits, may all beings awaken, Buddha bless. And there is also another sponsor for today's sharing who wishes to remain anonymous, and this person wishes to dedicate their contribution towards the swift removal of all obstacles to enable the return of Rinpoche's incarnation to Kechara Forest Retreat. So thank you guys very much for your support and for your contribution and sponsorship of today's sharing. And as usual, if you wish to sponsor a talk, there is a link in the description section of this video. So please click on it because your support, as I mentioned every week, your support helps us to continue to make these programs available. Okay, so moving on to today's question. It is, how did you know that you wanted to be a nun? I love Buddhism and I'm starting to feel the same way, I think. I'd be interested in your thoughts. All right, so again, if you guys have any questions, whether it's personal to me or whether it's something in general, please feel free to leave me a message in the comment section and I will either film a future video about it or answer it within the live stream itself or type out my answer. All right, so before I get into this, I do want to say that I've actually talked about this before, but it was usually in brief think the last time I covered it was during the Life in KFR in Lockdown series. But I'm going to get into a little more detail today. One, because we have time. I say that every week I run out of time. But one is because we have a little more time today, and two, because maybe there is something that will be shared in the course of this live stream that may help us to enjoy the experiences that we have while still being mindful of perhaps the attachments that we are encouraging and reinforcing. All right, so as a preface, I do want to say that just because you love Buddhism does not mean that you have to become ordained as a monk or a nun. Just because you love Buddhism, it does not mean you have to become a monk or nun in order to practice. All right, you can definitely practice without being ordained. And in fact, Rinpoche never ever told anyone to become ordained. Rinpoche never ever told anyone that they have to become a monk or a nun in order to practice. In fact, what Rinpoche always said was that stay as you are. If you're a layperson, stay as you are as a layperson, but practice consistently. Be kind, be generous, uphold your vows, whatever vows you've taken, uphold your vows, follow through with your commitments, be devoted to your guru. Rinpoche never ever said that someone has to become ordained in order to practice or in order to love Buddhism. All right, so if you want evidence of this, I guess you would say, Rinpoche created the Pastors Program specifically because there are some people who wish to take on more spiritual responsibility for others, but are not able at this moment in time or do not wish to seek full ordination. So they would like to take up more responsibility for their own and for other people's spirituality. So they choose or they request to become lay pastors. So they still have, families, they still have day jobs. They still do all the things that lay people do, but they are a lay pastor. All right, so that is very clear evidence that Rinpoche did not encourage or did not tell people that in order to practice Buddhism, in order to love Buddhism, you have to become ordained. All right, so I do want to preface my sharing by bringing that up, which is that in order to love Buddhism, you don't have to become a monk or a nun. But in short, in answer to your question, Crystal, I always knew that I wanted to become a nun. I might have, thought about it on and off throughout the years when I was younger, but it was basically always something that I wanted to do. And at the time when, I was like thinking, maybe not for me now, when I was like basically in my early 20s, I was still definitely thinking about becoming ordained as a nun in the future, like when I retire or when I'm older. All right, so I have known since I was 14 that I didn't want kids. And this was because of something that my mother told me. My mother told me that if I had known what I know now when I was when I got married and so on, I wouldn't have had you 3 children. And at the time, I took offense to that because I was like, Mom, how can you say that to your kids? Like, you wouldn't have had us? And then my mom explained that she had spent 18 years putting all of her energy into 3 kids. And that if she hadn't had the 3 of us, perhaps she could have done a lot more for so many more people or been able to direct her energy to so many more people. And so that was her reasoning for saying that, which is that if she had known back then what she knows now, she wouldn't have had the 3 of us. So that made a huge impression on me when I was 14, and I was thinking, I'm 14, it's another 4 years till I'm 18. When I'm 18, kind of like, that's it. Like, my mom's no longer responsible for me. But yeah, for 18 years, the 3 of us were like her focus. So that made a huge impression on me, like I said. And I decided when I was 14, like, I'm not going to have kids. And I always kind of found it strange when people said that I must have children, I must have a partner, I must get married, I must have a job. And I always thought, why must I have kids? Like, why must I get married? Like, who says I must do this? Like, who has actually made it compulsory for me to have kids? So yeah, I had that kind of thought when I was 14. Then when I was 16, I made my first request to Rinpoche to become a nun. Rinpoche consulted Doji Shukden. Doji Shukden told me not to do it. Doji Shukden told me to finish school first and then make the request again. So I went off to university and all of that. And then, whilst I was at university, had relationship and all that. And that was actually the time when I was thinking, well, since I have a partner and it's been going so well, we've been together for 4 years, maybe I will become a nun when we are much older, like when I'm in my 50s. So that was the time I was having those thoughts. And then I came back to Malaysia and I made my second request to be a nun. So that was in my early 20s, mid-20s, something like that. That was my second request. Then Rinpoche said, wait a little while. Rinpoche didn't accept my second request. And then on my third request, which was when I was 27, Rinpoche accepted my request at that time. All right. So basically, pretty much, I've always pretty much known that I've wanted to become ordained. Although, having said that, despite having known for a very long time, my parents were not immediately supportive. In fact, my mother didn't talk to me for 3 months after I made my third request and after my request was accepted. So she didn't speak to me for 3 months after that. She was very angry with me. But yeah, so it's not exactly like it's been straightforward. When I was 16, what triggered the first request was I was on pilgrimage to India and we had gone to a nunnery. And when I was at the nunnery, I just looked around and I looked at how happy the nuns were and how settled they were. And it felt extremely comfortable. It felt very familiar. It felt like something I'd seen before. And it didn't feel weird. It didn't feel like they were doing something strange. And then that kind of triggered that first request. And then I went off to university, and at university I studied psychology. And for the 3 years that I was studying, I just kept thinking, well, Buddha taught this before. Buddha spoke about this before. Like, Buddha gave teachings on this. Rinpoche taught this to me before. Like, I had classes on perception, I had classes on memory, I had classes on the relationship between psychology and the environment, and it was all things that Buddha had taught before for 3 years. And I was like, oh. So, and the funny thing was, one of my lecturers actually told me Western science is actually just catching up to Buddhist philosophy. That Buddhist philosophy he was Buddhist himself, and he said Buddhist philosophy has the advantage that whatever it is that the Buddha meditated on and described, that Buddhism actually has the advantage of applying it to ourselves. And so in Western science, the approach is to be as objective as possible, to distance the subject from the observer, right? So you form a hypothesis and then you test the hypothesis and you try to introduce as little of your own bias and as little of yourself to that observation, to that analysis, to that testing. Whereas in Buddhism, it's the total opposite. It's you observe phenomena, you observe your own mind, and then you apply it to yourself. So, one of my lecturers actually told me that on the first day of his course. So that made a huge impact on me when he said that. Then as I got older, my reason for wanting to become ordained, it did change slightly, but at its core it was still the same, but I think it got a little deeper, or rather it got a little clearer. And when somebody asked me, why is it that you chose to become ordained, the one reason I can think of that's extremely clear for me is that when I look around and when I listen to what it is that people ask or what people talk about, I see how much suffering there is around. And that no matter how rosy things sound or how perfect things sound, it's never the case that that's the full and complete picture. That underneath that wonderful presentation of the perfect life, that there is always some suffering. And I think that a lot of it is perpetuated and fueled by social media. Social media is wonderful like social media, like Instagram, is wonderful for selling the lie of a perfect life, right? So what I've realized is that whatever is presented on social media is not necessarily, or actually is not reality. And I have been the recipient. I've personally experienced this. For example, like someone asked me, why are you always cycling? Like, how come you cycle so much? Where do you get the time to cycle so much? And actually, I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. Actually, I don't cycle that much. It just seems like I do because I talk about it a lot and I pace up my photos. I pace up my posts. So sometimes the pictures and the videos actually come from the exact same ride. So let's say if I go for an hour-long ride and I take footage, I shoot footage for an hour, I'm only showing you guys 10 seconds each time, or 50 seconds each time. And if it's paced out, it just seems like I'm riding a lot, but actually I'm not. So I know from my own personal experience that what social media presents isn't reality. And social media is excellent for presenting the lie of a perfect life, but I know that underneath that there is a lot of suffering involved, and that people are never fully honest with us, even when you're face to face with them. So if we think that our friends are having this perfect life, having this perfect marriage, having this perfect career and so on, we are coming to that conclusion based off of what they tell us. And the thing is, people never tell us the full story, ever. For example, our colleagues, no matter how close we think we are with them, they will never tell us every single detail of their personal life. They will never tell us every single event that's happening to them. They'll never tell us every experience that they've had, every occurrence that has caused them trauma and so on. All right, so I realized that when I looked around, that there's still an incredible amount of suffering. And I saw this not just with Rinpoche. I saw this a lot with Rinpoche, but I also saw it, and I see it myself now, that people who are rich and who are wealthy, they will always be insecure about losing their money. Or if they're not insecure about losing their money, then they will desire to have more money. People who are beautiful will be insecure about losing their looks. Or if they're not insecure about losing their looks, then they will be driven by the desire to retain their looks. There are people who are very popular, who are very insecure about losing their fame. And if they are so insecure about losing their fame, they may be very desire-driven to maintain their popularity. People who are poor will be very insecure about their ability to provide for themselves or for their loved ones. And they will be very driven by the desire to provide more for themselves or for their loved ones. People who are very lonely will feel very insecure about not having a partner. People who have a partner will be very insecure about keeping their partner. So there's a great deal of dissatisfaction. There's a great deal of insecurity, and we are never truly comfortable, satisfied, fulfilled in our state. And we're always looking for that fulfillment, always looking for more or better or different. There are people all around me all the time who are like constantly signing up for personal development courses, personal development programs, or constantly going away on holidays, constantly looking for something exciting, looking for a new restaurant, like pursuing the latest diet and so on, like the latest fashion and all that. And all of that is a symptom of, or what Rinpoche described was that all of that is a symptom of boredom, a symptom of dissatisfaction with life, with everything around them. And there is some kind of desire that they're looking to fulfill, that there is a recognition of unhappiness, and this drive to try and find something that will quell that unhappiness. When I talk about this stuff, and I talk about how people who are wealthy will tell me that they're very insecure about their wealth, or people who are beautiful will share that they're very insecure about losing their looks. Okay, first of all, what I want to say is that it's a privilege for someone to have the trust to confide in me with these fears, all right? And that's what Rinpoche always said, is that it's a privilege that people trust us enough to share these insecurities and to share these fears with us. And it's a privilege to be able to use whatever knowledge it is that Rinpoche shared with us in order to help other people. When I talk about this stuff, I'm not saying that these people are bad, because they're not inherently bad people. This isn't about judgment at all right? This is saying that the underlying basis of saying this is that people suffer as a result of the decisions that they make. I suffer as a result of the decisions that I make. You suffer as a result of the decisions that you make. And as a result of that suffering, people want to know how to make it better. And that's why they come to Rinpoche. That's why they come to the pastors now. And they ask these questions because they want to know how to alleviate the suffering, and they want to know how to make things better. So someone who is insecure, someone who is disappointed with whatever experiences that they've had in life, they are not bad people for wanting to try to maintain the status quo or wanting to improve their experiences in this existence. A person is not bad for wanting these things, all right? But what it is that they talk about and what it is that people ask about is a symptom of how they feel, is a reflection of how they feel. And it's a reflection of where they are mentally and emotionally. And it's a reflection of the fact that they didn't know any better, or that somebody wasn't around to teach them or to show them any differently. So one of my first reasons for wanting to seek ordination was that I looked around and I saw how much suffering there is, no matter how perfect life is, no matter how rosy things appear to be, no matter how good things appear to be, there is always suffering somewhere. And when I listened to the problems that people share, and I listened to the suffering that they're experiencing, and I thought about it and I meditated on it, I realized how much of it is actually self-created, and how often we make decisions that are harmful or not beneficial to ourselves and to other people, and how often we don't have to suffer because we don't have to do any of those things, and how often that suffering arises from something that doesn't actually truly exist. So the most recent example that I can give you is a friend who contacted me early last week, and she had gone to see a medium, and she had done a tarot card reading. And before I get into this story, I want to tell you guys, and again, as usual, advise you guys, please don't go for tarot card readings. I won't go into exactly why, but it's not recommended, all right? There are other ways of seeking advice. So she had gone for this reading, and then had subsequently spent days suffering, doubting her partner, not trusting him, being extremely sad, being extremely worried. Why? Because the cards had so-called told her that she cannot trust her partner, that her partner will let her down, that there is a possibility that she won't have children. So as she was telling me all of this, and she was so distraught about this, if she was Buddhist, what I would have told her was, or advised her, was about karma, right? I would have shared with her Buddha's teachings on karma and how karma can be changed. I would have shared with her how Buddhists deal with disappointment and so on. But instead of being able to talk about karma, what I could talk to her about was how the suffering that she had experienced since having the cards read, or told to her rather, was suffering arising out of something that hasn't actually happened yet. Her partner hasn't let her down yet. Her partner hasn't given her any cause to not trust him. She doesn't have any medical evidence that she will not be able to have children. So the suffering and the deep sadness that she experienced since having the cards read was over something that doesn't exist, something that hasn't happened. I would have advised her, who is forcing her to have a relationship? Who is forcing her to have kids? Who is telling her that she must have children? So when I raise that example, what I'm trying to say is that although we may not be running around, consulting tarot cards and so on, that is us a lot of the time, is that we are creating suffering for ourselves out of something that doesn't exist, something that's conjured up in our minds, something that we make up and then we dwell on and then we escalate in our minds. We are creating suffering for ourselves based out of our projections of other people, based out of our perception of other people. And these things don't really exist. They don't inherently exist. So when people talk about, the challenges that they're having, the problems that they're having, one of the reasons why I wanted to seek ordination was I realized how much of our own problems are self-created, how much of our own suffering is self-created for ourselves and for other people. And so personally, and I really want to stress that this is personal to me, right? It may not be applicable to everyone, is that when I listen to people talking about their problems, whether it's financial problems or career problems or marriage problems or spirit problems, a sense of aversion arises towards that life and towards that path. And like I said, I want to make it very clear that I'm not judging people's decisions here. I'm not saying that a person's decision is good or bad. I'm not saying that a person is good or bad on the basis of their decisions. What I'm saying is that those decisions are ill-suited to what it is that I want to accomplish at the end of my life. And so that's where the aversion arises from. That it is not something that I want for myself. All right, so if somebody needs help, and if someone comes with problems, and someone comes and describes what suffering and what painful experiences they're going through, it doesn't matter whether I agree with their decision or not. It doesn't matter whether I think the decision is good or bad or not. If a person's suffering, you have to help them. End of story. All right, you don't need to cast judgment on how they arrived at that position or how they arrived in that situation. You help. End of story. All right, but it's not something that I want for myself. All right, for myself, and I want to make that clear. It's a personal thing. Personally, I feel like the emotional upheavals, all the ups and downs, all of the complications may not necessarily. Let me think about a better way of putting this. Right. It's a question of being pragmatic. If I'm going to live for 80 years, if I'm so lucky to have 80 years as a human, I'm definitely going to have all the ups and downs, all the emotional upheavals. I'm definitely going to have complications, going to have challenges. I'm going to suffer in these 80 years. But for myself, my question is, what do I want to suffer for? Do I want to suffer for something that I cannot take with me at the end of the 80 years? Or do I want to suffer for something that I can take with me at the end of 80 years? So, do I want to suffer in a job? Do I want to suffer having an annoying boss? Do I want to suffer colleagues? Do I want to suffer financial difficulties and all of these things? And then at 80 years, all I have is a bank balance. And then when I die, I can't take the bank balance with me. Do I want to suffer all of the ups and downs, all of the emotional investment in kids, and then at the end of 80 years, I can't take my children with me? Or do I want to suffer all of these things, and then at the end of 80 years, I've developed a little attainment that I can, or a little realization that I can carry on with me to my next life? I'm still going to go through all of the suffering. I'm still going to go through all of the difficult situations. I'm still going to go through all of the physical challenges and everything. But what do I want to get out of it? What am I doing it for at the end of the 80 years? All right, so at this point, you might be thinking, can you not practice as a layperson? Can you not just practice as a regular person? Why do you have to become ordained, or why do you have to seek ordination as a monk or a nun in order to practice Buddhism, in order to get something out of the end of your 80 years? You can. No one ever said that you can't. No one ever said that you cannot practice diligently and practice consistently over 80 years whilst doing all of the other things that you wish to do as a layperson. No one ever said you can't do that. And you definitely can do that. There are plenty of accomplished lay practitioners. Many years ago, a Tibetan lady came to see Rinpoche, and elderly, I think in the 60s or 70s, and Rinpoche asked her, Amala, what are you doing now that you're older, now that you are in your senior years? And she told Rinpoche that now all she focuses on doing is Vajrayogini retreat. That's all she does, day in, day out, and that's all that she will do until the end of her life. So it is for sure that you can practice diligently and consistently as a lay practitioner. However, again, personally for me, I find that it's much harder to do so because there are far more distractions as a lay practitioner. That is why monks and nuns don't have relationships. That is why monks and nuns stay in the monastery. That is why monks and nuns take vows. Because all of these guidelines and this type of environment is designed to cut away distractions and designed to reduce our attachments. It's designed to make it easier for us to practice. So for me, one of the reasons why I wish to seek ordination is because I wish and I wanted to be in an environment, and I wanted to be in a situation and have a set of circumstances that was, more conducive automatically, naturally, to practice. That I didn't want to have to deal with distractions. I didn't want to have to deal with unnecessary distractions that I was creating for myself. I want to say that ordination isn't for everyone, all right? And that ordination is not a bed of roses. Ordination does not, once you request for ordination, once you request to become a monk or nun, it doesn't mean that automatically everything becomes fantastic, everything becomes easy, that everything becomes very, very simple. All right? It is a very common misconception that people have. Once you request to become ordained, it doesn't mean that your mind won't change. It doesn't mean that your mind won't go up and down. Even someone like Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, if you read her book Cave in the Snow, which Rinpoche asked me to read regularly, if you read Cave in the Snow, Jetsuma describes how before she left for England in order to seek ordination, she nearly had a change of heart because she got connected with someone who presented romantic opportunities to her, and she briefly considered for a moment giving up ordination in order to pursue that, but she decided not to. So even someone as great as Jetsuma had a brief moment of doubt, had a brief moment of second guessing her decision. So once you decide to seek ordination, or once you request to become ordained, the common misconception is that everything becomes easy, but it's not true. That there is still doubt, that there is still second guessing, and that people's minds do still go up and down, and people's minds still do go back and forth. People go into ordination with expectations, and these expectations are very, very, for lack of a better word, dangerous and not beneficial to achieving the goal that we want. There is the expectation that when you become ordained, you will automatically get support, that you will automatically get assistance, that your practice will immediately grow tremendously, that suddenly you will get respect, suddenly you will get fame, suddenly you get popularity, and suddenly you will be accepted, suddenly you have a place where you belong. What Rinpoche described is that actually, once you become ordained, that is not the case. All right? that actually in today's world, in today's society, once you request to become ordained or you signal your intention to seek ordination, you won't get respect. You won't get help. You won't get support. Actually, what you will get is you will get people questioning your choice. You will get people doubting your decision. You will get people calling you crazy. You will get people asking you why you choose to do something like this, why you want to waste your life. You will get people saying, well, since you decided to become ordained, you don't want to support yourself, so I'm not going to support you. You will get a lot of challenges. You get a lot of people criticizing you. And that's happened. When Rinpoche described that, I was like, I mean, of course, because Rinpoche described it, I believed it. But it wasn't until I experienced it myself that I was like, oh, actually, this really is the case. Every interview I've ever done, the interviewer has always asked me, why did you decide to become a nun? Why did you decide not to get married? Why did you decide not to have a family? Like, you're wasting your life. It happened to me 2 months ago. Someone in the street came up to me and told me, you shouldn't get married. You shouldn't become a nun. You should get married. Prayer should only be confined to a certain period of time, and after you're done with praying, then you should go and take care of your family. You should go and have a husband. You should go and have kids. There's something not right with you. There's something wrong with your brain. There's something wrong with your way of thinking. All right, so I know from experience that that is what people think. And so what I want to say is that although ordination may seem like the perfect answer and solution to all of the problems that we're facing, it's not. And that going into ordination with expectations is a recipe for disaster, basically. All right. So ordination isn't for everyone. What I do want to say is that on a personal level, yes, although I have known for a very, very long time that I want to be a nun, it doesn't mean that things are easy. It doesn't mean that I don't still struggle. And there are things that I still find difficult. And because of my age, because of my background, because of how I was raised, oftentimes I indulge in the what if fantasy. So what if I don't do this anymore and I go and get a job? What if I don't do this anymore and I go and pursue a partner? What if I don't do this anymore and I drop everything and I go and live the van life and disappear off into the sunset? So although I have known since I was 16 that I want to be a nun, still, because of habituation, sometimes I do indulge in the what if fantasy. Now, the advantage that I've had thanks to Rinpoche's training and Rinpoche's guidance is that the what if fantasy never really lasts for long. It doesn't really move beyond what if. It never moves beyond what if, because Rinpoche taught us to think. After the what if, you need to meditate on what is it for. So Rinpoche taught us to examine, Rinpoche taught us to analyze the what if fantasy that we have, and realize that this what if fantasy is escapism. It's not reality. That all the things I would like to do are based off of what I imagine they would be, that they don't truly exist. I imagine that if I don't do this anymore and I go and seek a job and I go and pursue a career, that the career will go swimmingly, that everything will be fine, that I will get a fantastic job and that I will get a very good salary. But that is projection. That is not reality. That is not confirmed. That's not guaranteed. If I don't do this anymore, what if I go and pursue a partner? The projection is that the relationship will go well, that everything will be fine, that we won't argue, that everything will go as expected. But that is not reality. There will be difficulties, there will be disagreements, there will be a lot of emotional upheaval and so on. Why is it escapism? Why is it not reality? Because no matter what situation it is that I pursue, the problem is that I'm bringing myself with it. I'm bringing all of my hang-ups, all of my emotional baggage, all of my traumas, all of my experiences with me. So it doesn't matter if I pursue the van life and drive off into the sunset and I'm in the middle of the forest and there's nobody else around me. If I am depressed now, I will be depressed in the forest. If I'm jealous now, I will be jealous in the forest. If I am petty now, I will be petty in the forest. Because it's not about the environment, it's not about the situation, it's not about who is around me, it's about me. It's about me carrying my shortcomings, me carrying my qualities into a different environment. So me pursuing or contemplating and dwelling on and building up that what if fantasy, that is escapism. That is not reality. That is not what is truly happening around me. The other problem with pursuing the what if fantasy is the thought that when Rinpoche comes back, what is it that I'm going to explain to Rinpoche that I've been doing for the last few years? If Rinpoche, the 26th San Rinpoche comes back and asks, so what have you been up to for the last few years since I've been gone? What am I going to say? Oh, actually, I decided not to become ordained. I decided not to pursue nunhood, and I decided to go after a partner. I decided to pursue a career. I decided to drop everything and go off and live in the forest in a van. You can tell I really want to pursue the van life. But that's the other problem with playing up and escalating the what if fantasy is, what promises did I make to Rinpoche? And would Rinpoche be happy with me updating what it is that I've been up to? If I know that Rinpoche won't be happy with it, then why would I go for it? And the other problem with pursuing the what if fantasy is that that train of thought always turns into a meditation, and it always turns into something where I think, well, what if I do this, and then what? So, for example, what if I get a partner? And after I get a partner, then what? What if I pursue a career, and after I get the career, and then what? After I get the partner, then what? We get married, and then what? We have kids, and then what? We raise our children, and then what? We work very hard to send our kids to university, and then what? Our children get older, and then they leave the home, and then what? I go and retire and live on a cruise ship, and then what? So the what if fantasy turns into a meditation of and then what? And that's what Rinpoche always encouraged us to think was, and then what? If you're going to do something, and then what? If I have children, there's no guarantee, and I put all of my effort and energy into them. After I get old, is there a guarantee that they're going to take care of me? If that's your reason for having kids, there's no guarantee. If I have children to save a relationship, which never works, is there a guarantee that it will save the relationship? Not necessarily. So what ifs extend and then become and then what? If I'm doing this, and then what? What is the purpose for me doing something? No matter how positive I think a relationship will turn out, for example, there's no guarantee that it will end in a nice way. There is no guarantee that I won't disappoint the other person won't disappoint me. And after all of the disappointment, ups and downs, and then the reconciliation and so on, and then what? No matter how positive or beautiful or wonderful a relationship is, at the end of our lifespan, there is still going to be separation. There is still going to be sadness. There is still going to be disappointment. Because even if it's not earlier on as a result of, for example, divorce and so on, at the moment of death, you still have to separate. So my thinking for me, again, I want to say this is personal to me. I'm not saying this and I'm not bringing this up to encourage you guys to, since Pastor Gina said this, I'm going to get divorced. No, okay? Please don't think of it that way, because I know that there are people who have listened to some sharings and then been like, if I want to practice, I need to divorce my husband. I didn't say that, okay? So please don't go down that line. I'm saying that this is something that I think about, is that if I pursue something, and then what? Did I just spend my 80 years putting all of my energy into this, and then at the end of my life, or at the end of my partner's life, we separate anyway. And then what do I have left to show for it? So when I talk about the reasons for why I would like to become ordained, first reason is I looked around and I saw that no matter how perfect life appears to be, or no matter how perfect things appear to be, and no matter how Stepford, wivesy, suburbia perfection, domestic goddessy life appears to be for so many people, it's not the truth, it's not reality. There is still a great deal of suffering for everyone. That our suffering is extremely self-created, that our suffering that we cause to other people is self-created, and that ordination puts me in an environment, in a supportive environment, in a supportive structure that compels me and guides me automatically, sometimes very uncomfortably, but automatically to try and break that cycle of creating suffering for myself and for other people. That on a personal level, I still struggle and find many things very difficult. I guess because of my age, that I still perceive that there are options to me, and so this perception of options creates a lot of suffering for myself. That ordination isn't for everyone, but personally for me, I seek ordination. One of my reasons for seeking ordination is because I wish to reduce the number of distractions that I have. That becoming ordained doesn't mean that things will become easy or things will become perfect or that you will automatically get support and everybody will respect you. It doesn't mean any of that. That actually, once you become ordained, most people think you're nuts. I've actually had people come up to me and tell me that I'm crazy before. In fact, a police officer told me the other day, like when I got stopped at a roadblock because of the COVID thing, he was like, "Why do you want to become a nun? You're crazy." And I was like, "Great, thanks. Can I go?" So, those are some of the reasons, all right? Like I said, ordination isn't for everyone. And ordination doesn't mean that once you become a monk or a nun, or once you start out on that path, that all of your problems will disappear and that your life will become easier. And that this isn't a clarion call for people to go and dump their partners or for people to go and divorce their husbands or wives. This is not that. This is to say that these are my reasons for wishing to seek ordination, and that personally for me, this path, I'm pursuing this path because I wish to reduce distractions. And that, as Rinpoche said before, if you're a lay person, be a good lay person, be a kind person, practice generosity, do your sadhana, do your prayers, do your offerings, support your teachers, support your Dharma center, support the Sangha. Be the best lay person that you can be. Be responsible to your family. Be a good husband, be a good wife, be a good child to your parents. Do your practice. All right? Ordination isn't for everyone, and like I mentioned right at the beginning of this sharing, just because you love Buddhism does not mean that you have to seek ordination, does not mean that you have to go for ordination. So again, recap, because I was like kind of all over the place. Reasons why I wish to pursue ordination and to become a nun was, number one, I looked around and I saw a great deal of suffering. No matter how rosy things appear to be, it is never the true story. Number two, I looked at how much of our suffering is self-created, and I wish to put myself in a position where I didn't have to be part of that cycle anymore. I wish to put myself in a position where I wasn't distracted from breaking that cycle for myself and for other people. And that if someone wishes to seek ordination, they need to realize and understand that ordination is not the solution to all of your problems, because it doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter if you're ordained or not. You are still carrying all of the hang-ups and all of the qualities that you have with you. It doesn't matter if you're in the forest, completely isolated and alone, or if you're in the middle of the city. If you have hang-ups, you will still have hang-ups even after you are ordained. But the reason why you become ordained is because you want to help other people, you want to help yourself, and you want to put yourself in an environment and in a situation where you can actually do something about it, as per what was taught by Lord Buddha. All right. There is a question here from Yiling. Do you think ordination with all of its rules and guidelines have removed the obstacles that a lay person faces every day? Most people feel that ordination is a form of escape. One of the reasons why most people feel the ordination is a form of escape is because they don't have an understanding of why someone becomes ordained. Like I mentioned earlier, the reason why people think of ordination as an escape is because they think that after they become ordained, after someone becomes ordained, they are suddenly free of all responsibilities, that suddenly everything becomes very easy, that suddenly support becomes automatic, that suddenly assistance is very forthcoming. The truth of the matter is that it's not. In fact, if you guys read Gurus for Higher Enlightenment for Sale, there is a passage in the book where Rinpoche describes that historically and also in Buddhist countries, it was the case where monks and nuns did get support. But nowadays, that's not true. Nowadays, Rinpoche described that nowadays, actually, instead of turning the wheel of Dharma, most teachers spend their time administrating the center. Most teachers spend their time speaking to sponsors, raising funds. Most teachers spend their time trying to garner support for the Dharma, as opposed to teaching the Dharma itself. Do you guys think that His Holiness Kyabje Pabongka Rinpoche, for example, in Lhasa, spent 70% of his time, 80% of his time talking to sponsors? Do you think His Holiness Kyabje Pabongka Rinpoche spent his time trying to raise funds? In a place like Lhasa, in a place like Tibet, at those times, His Holiness Kyabje Pabongka Rinpoche focused on turning the wheel of Dharma, focused on teaching. So, in actuality, ordination in this day and age especially is not a form of escapism, because in fact the responsibility for monk and nun increases exponentially, because not only are you now responsible for secular things, for example raising funds for your Dharma center, for your monastery, for example getting support, but now you're also responsible for someone else's spirituality. People look at someone in robes as a symbol of a person that they can trust, and as a symbol or reflection of somebody whose answers or whose knowledge and information is something that you can rely on. And so, if you are careless, if you're flippant, and you offer the wrong guidance, or you offer the wrong advice, and things go wrong, you're responsible for it. So it's not escapism. It's not escapism, because your responsibility for someone increases exponentially, because now you're responsible for someone else's spirituality. The repercussions of messing up are not just contained to this lifetime alone, but they are applicable and they will apply for many, many lifetimes. Now, when you talk about ordination with all of its rules and its guidelines, actually, what Rinpoche explained to us before is that people view the rules and guidelines as limiting. People view the rules and guidelines as imprisonment, as a pain in the butt. People view the rules and guidelines as being very restrictive. That's the word I was looking for, restrictive. They're not. What is restrictive about a vow that asks you not to kill? What is restrictive about a vow that asks you not to lie? What is restrictive about a vow that tells you not to cheat people? What is restrictive about a vow that asks you to handle offerings in a way that's most beneficial for the person who's offered it to you? What is restrictive about a vow that tells you that whatever it is that you receive, you think, this does not belong to me, this belongs to the temple, or this belongs to whoever has offered it, or this belongs to whoever is to receive it next? There's nothing restrictive about that. The rules and the guidelines of ordination actually are all in place to guide us to become better people, to become a better human being. That's it. The reason why we find it restrictive is because all of these actions and all of these activities and behaviors are things that we are actually the opposite of it. We are habituated into finding the opposite of all of these things natural. So we are habituated into thinking that actually desire is fine, that greed is fine, that pursuing a higher profit margin, I don't know, or that kind of thing, that all of these things are normal, that all of these things are natural. Because we are trained to think that, these types of behaviors are natural, when it comes to looking at the vows, when it comes to looking at the rules and guidelines of ordination, we find those things to be restrictive because it's contrary to what it is that we've already been trained to do. But if you examine the vows, if you know the vows and you know the rules and guidelines, they're not restrictive. They are all there to help us to unlearn all of the habits that we have picked up over many, many lifetimes. They are there to help us to become better human beings, and that's it. What evidence can I offer that following the vows helps us to become better human beings? Rinpoche. If you guys know anything about Rinpoche, or for whatever it is that you know about Rinpoche, you know Rinpoche that was perfect. Rinpoche will always claim that he's not perfect, but Rinpoche was perfect. And Rinpoche held his vows perfectly, effortlessly. Alright? When we were given the opportunity to study the Vinaya, the first thing I realized was every single vow that is in the Vinaya, Rinpoche held every single one without even thinking about it. Now, if you really contemplate, how difficult is it for us to, for example, hold the 8 precepts for 24 hours? How many people are reluctant to hold the 8 precepts for 24 hours? That's 8 vows. And already people find it so difficult. Already people find it difficult to keep 8 vows for 24 hours. Rinpoche held over 200 vows perfectly and effortlessly without even thinking about it. Now, if you think about it, out of everyone that you know in your life, who comes even remotely close to perfection than Rinpoche? Who comes even remotely close to being an extremely wonderful human being other than Rinpoche? Or other than your guru? So if you think about it, if you follow the vows as perfectly as Rinpoche did, that is the result. The result is that you become the kind of human being that you observe, you develop the kind of qualities that you observe in Rinpoche, that you so admire, that you so respect. So are the rules and guidelines of ordination restrictive? No. Because Rinpoche wasn't restrictive, Rinpoche wasn't restricted. Rinpoche didn't escape anything. In fact, Rinpoche had so many more responsibilities than all of us put together. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has so many more responsibilities than all of us put together. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Rinpoche, haven't escaped anything, haven't escaped any of the responsibilities. But yet, they have so many qualities that we ourselves want to develop. How did they develop it? They developed it, Rinpoche developed it by holding the vows perfectly and effortlessly. Alright? So, do I think the ordination with all of these rules and guidelines have removed obstacles that a lay person faces every day? I think the rules and guidelines, if people are willing and committed to follow them, if you're willing and committed to following them, the result that you're going to get, the result that you're going to develop is most perfectly encapsulated, most perfectly exemplified by Rinpoche. You only need to look at Rinpoche to know that if you hold your vows perfectly, that is what you will develop. Those are the qualities that you will achieve. Alright? So, Crystal, I'm sorry this was kind of all over the place, but I hope that there was something inside what I rambled through that was helpful for you today. Let me see, what did Mark say? Reference material, yes, that video is a very good video. You're absolutely right. Retreat has little to do with running away. Why does retreat have little to do with running away? Because in retreat, you are actually putting yourself in an environment and in a situation where you're compelling yourself to face yourself. Because you're removing all distractions that we normally engage in and giving ourselves time out to examine our minds. We distract ourselves with relationships, we distract ourselves with work, we distract ourselves with consumerism, with shopping, with going out, with going to parties, with going to the gym and all of that. We distract ourselves from that because we find it very uncomfortable to face ourselves. And so when you're in retreat, it's not about escaping. In fact, when you're not in retreat, you're actually escaping yourself. Because in retreat, you are facing yourself, you're forcing yourself to face yourself. When you meditate, you're facing yourself. All right, so yes, retreat has nothing actually to do with running away. I should think ordination would be the most challenging, if not more so than household and life. Ordination is challenging if there is, as what Rinpoche said, if we hold ourselves back from going all the way with something, and if we have doubt, if we second guess, ordination will be challenging. But for Rinpoche, ordination was not challenging. Rinpoche actually always said that, in fact, being ordained and being a monk was the easiest thing that Rinpoche has ever done. And I know you guys will be saying, oh, Rinpoche has 25 lifetimes of being an enlightened practitioner. And so, yes, it will be extremely simple for Rinpoche to keep the vows. Of course, it'll be simple for Rinpoche to keep the vows because Rinpoche has so many more lifetimes of that and we don't. But that's the thing. Rinpoche started so many more lifetimes before us. If we don't start doing, or we don't start laying the foundations now, if we don't start creating the causes now, we will never get to that stage. All right? In 25 lifetimes, do we want to find ourselves with the ability to hold the vows as easily as Rinpoche did? All right, so we need to start from somewhere, is what I'm saying. Okay? Sukfan said, hence we pay utmost respect to the community of Sangha as they carry on the teaching of the Buddha and in our case carry on the lineage of Gelug and Rinpoche's legacy to spread the Vajrayogini and Dorje Shugden teachings. Yeah, exactly, Sukfan. That is why the Sangha is one of the three jewels. Rinpoche said that the Sangha keep the lineage and keep the blessings of Lord Buddha's teachings alive, that they actually take, unlike so many of us, who continue to pursue the things that we desire, that continue to pursue the things that we want. The Sangha took a step back from that and decided that they want to continue to preserve a body of teachings and preserve not just the body of teachings, but the blessings that it contains for future generations. So we have a lot to be grateful to the Sangha for. All right. So yeah, like I said, Crystal, I hope that there was something in my rambling today that you found helpful. If there isn't, do let me know, and I'll try to clarify for you again in the comment section or in next week's video. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Don't worry if you think that it's too personal. I am an open book. I will tell you all the embarrassing, stupid stories about myself. Yeah. Like what Rinpoche said, right? If you tell it, it no longer holds any power over you. So don't worry if you think that the questions are too personal. Just ask me anyway. And if I don't want to answer it, okay, so yeah, I'm just kidding about that. Just ask me. All right, so yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. Or shoot me a private message, and then I will reply. As we move into this new week, especially as we're moving into the end of the year, with 2020 having been such an interesting year for all of us, I want to ask you guys to take some time out to think. Maybe ordination isn't for you. And like I mentioned before, it's not necessarily for everyone. But as a lay practitioner, as a lay person, as a householder, what is it that we can do to bring ourselves a little closer to practicing and applying what it is that Buddha taught without having to become ordained? The thing is, you don't have to have gone through a formal ceremony. For example, you don't have to have gone through the formal ceremony of taking the 8 precepts in order to practice them. Sure, there will be blessings definitely involved if you were to take the vows in relation to the 3 jewels. But what is to stop you from not lying? What is to stop you from practicing not killing? What is to stop you from practicing speech that benefits others? What is to stop you from practicing not stealing? What is to stop you from practicing not taking the life of an animal because you don't want to be vegetarian? Nothing stops us from doing that. And so, as we are moving into the end of the year, think, as a lay person, as a householder, what is it that we can do in our daily lives to bring us closer to Buddha, to bring us closer to our Guru, to bring us closer to emulating the qualities that we so respect in our teacher? What is it that we can adjust in our daily life to bring us closer to all of those things? We have to start from somewhere. If we can't take 200 vows now, for example, start with 1. Start with 2. Take a vow, hold it for 24 hours. Take a vow, then hold it for 48 hours. Take a vow and then hold it for a day, a week, a month, a year. But start from somewhere. Alright, so as we are moving into the end of the year, take some time out to think. What is it that I can do in my daily life as a householder to bring myself closer to Buddha? What is it that I can, do to grow my practice? In the last year, how much of my practice has grown? Or how much, or what aspects of my practice need a little bit more attention, need a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more watering, for it to blossom. And so think about that as we're moving into the new week, without judgment of yourself. So please remember, don't judge yourself as being good or bad. Don't think of yourself as, oh my God, I failed in this, I should have done better in this. Don't think of yourself that way. Just look at it objectively. What is it that I need to work on a little bit more next year? What is it that has improved? Give yourself a quick pat on the back and then think, okay, so since I improved on this, can I grow it more next year? Right? So yeah, basically that is it from me for today, for this week. Think about that and maybe write it down and then share it with me next week. Maybe there's something that you can share that someone else might read that might be helpful for them, and maybe help to shed a little light for them. All right. Before I go, just some quick reminders. There is the Doji Shukden Sadhana on the Chinese Kechara Facebook fan page at 10 p.m. tonight. So if you guys have any requests for offerings or prayers to be made, please feel free to post it there. Then Tuesday at 9:30, there's Easy Dharma for the new normal. And then on Thursday at 8 p.m, there is the Senrimchi Swift Return Puja on the Kecharans and Friends Facebook group. All right. So that is it from me for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday. And I'm sorry if any of this was not as clear as I had hoped for it to be. Yeah, so if you have any questions, please let me know. All right. Don't forget to do your dedications. Don't forget to do your prayers. And I guess with that, I will see you guys same time, same place next week. Have a fantastic week ahead, and please be kind to others. All right. Bye, guys.